It's only fitting that the best coach in college football resides in the best conference in college football. But how do the remaining SEC coaches stack up against Nick Saban? Find out right here on the Gridiron Expert. There's no debate as to why Nick Saban is number one in our 2019 SEC head coaching rankings. Saban is 146-21 during his time at Alabama, and that includes 5 national championships. That not only makes him the best head coach in the SEC, but also the best head coach in the entire nation. And before we break down the remaining 13 coaches and why we have them ranked where they are, I want to make a statement about these rankings. These rankings are not solely based on the success of the coaches last year. What happened last year does play a major role in these rankings, but also their track record overall plays a very major role. Their success over the course of their entire coaching career, whether it's been at this school the entire time or whether it's been at other schools. Also, their promise for the future. What is the outlook for these coaches and their teams down the road? Not just for 2019, but for the season after and the seasons to come. What is the promise for these coaches? Do we see an upward trend for these coaches, or maybe a downward trend that could affect their ranking here? So a lot of factors went into play when we started ranking these other 13 coaches after Nick Saban. And number 2 is Kirby Smart, which once again should not be a major surprise as to where he's ranked. Smart took the job at Georgia just 3 years ago, is now entering year 4 in Athens. He is 32-10. Made a national championship appearance just 2 years ago where he faced off against Nick Saban and Alabama, unfortunately losing that game in devastating fashion to Tua Tagovailoa. Last year, just barely missed out on making the college football playoff, once again losing a heartbreaking game to Alabama in the SEC championship game. But he has not lost a game to an SEC East opponent since October 29th, 2016. Since that date, Kirby Smart and Georgia are 13-0 versus SEC East opponents and have won those games by an average of 23.5 points per game. So to me, it is a no-brainer to have Kirby Smart at number 2. Even though he has not been at Georgia for very long, he has already made Georgia relevant again, both in the SEC and on the national stage. And as we said, is there promise for the future? Absolutely. Georgia will once again remain a national title contender for many years to come as long as Kirby Smart stays down in Athens. Number 3 was a very difficult spot for me. I struggled on whether to put Jimbo Fisher at number 3 or Dan Mullen at number 3. In the end, though, the track record overall is what gave Jimbo Fisher the edge for the number 3 spot in our SEC rankings. Fisher just went 9-4 in his first year down at College Station, a very major move for Texas A&M to lure him away from Florida State, signing him to a massive 10-year, $75 million contract. But there's a lot of hype surrounding Jimbo Fisher and the Aggies this year. So there's a lot of upward trends going for Texas A&M despite facing such a very difficult schedule. But the Aggies closed the season with 4 straight wins, nearly beat Clemson last year in College Station, losing 28-26. And keep in mind, Jimbo Fisher did phenomenal things down in Tallahassee at Florida State, winning a national championship there over Auburn, kind of breeding Jameis Winston and plenty of NFL talent down there. So he gets the slight edge over Dan Mullen for the 3rd spot in our rankings, although I would not have been surprised and would have been okay putting Dan Mullen up there at number 3. Mullen has plenty of experience in the SEC, offensive coordinator at Florida, head coach at Mississippi State, and now back where he wants to be, head coach of the Florida Gators. Overall, he is 79-49 in his career. But in just year 1 at Florida, he turned around a struggling program that Jim McElwain kind of ran into the ground despite making multiple SEC title appearances. And in just year 1, went 10-3 and won the Peach Bowl in dominating fashion over Michigan. We mentioned how dominant Georgia has been in the SEC East. That streak of wins against SEC East opponents could come to an end in 2019. Florida is by far the biggest threat to the Bulldogs in the East, and all that goes to credit to Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen deserves all the credit for that, for transforming a Gators team in just his first year. He has got them moving upward. A lot of people have them as a potential dark horse playoff contender, if not at least another contender in the SEC East that could certainly challenge Georgia for that East crown in 2019. And Dan Mullen, once again, deserves all the credit for that. Certainly worthy of this number 4 spot and maybe even the number 3 spot in the SEC. Number 5, Ed Orgeron down at LSU. Now, kind of a wild story for Ed Orgeron, taking over as interim head coach, coaching the final 8 games a couple years ago after the firing of Les Miles in the middle of the season. He is 25-9 during his time with LSU and has done a phenomenal job there. We mentioned that he went 6-2 during the time when he took over for Les Miles, and that was good enough to get him the full-time position with the Tigers. He's done a phenomenal job in those 2 seasons, winning 10 games last year, including a Fiesta Bowl victory over the national champions Central Florida Knights, ending their long win streak over 25 games. Last year going 10-3. There's no debate that Ed Orgeron is in the upper echelon of SEC coaches. Now, he does not deserve, in my opinion, to be in the top 4 above the likes of Dan Mullen or Jimbo Fisher, but 5, I think, is the perfect spot for him. He has once again made LSU relevant. Now, not to say that they weren't before, but Les Miles' teams were very stagnant, could never get an offense going, were known for their defenses, and couldn't really win the big games. Has LSU under Ed Orgeron beaten Alabama yet? No, they have not. Could they be getting there sometime soon? I believe that they can. We saw that last year, how I know that game against Alabama was nothing pretty, but we saw the drastic change, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that Ed Orgeron has brought down to Baton Rouge. That's why he deserves this number 5 spot. LSU, once again, a major SEC West title contender in 2019 and potentially a playoff contender, much like they were up until November of this past season. Gus Malzahn coming in at number 6, right above the halfway point, and I could have put him down at number 7 and bumped up Mark Stoops, but Gus Malzahn, once again, his track record is what gives him the slight edge, and really it's not that impressive of a track record. During his time at Auburn, he is 53-27. He made a national championship appearance in his first year in 2013, going 12-2, falling to Jimbo Fisher and Florida State, which he was with at the time. But after that, he went 8-5, then 7-6, 8-5 again. 10-4, a year that Auburn beat both Alabama and Georgia before falling to Georgia in the SEC championship game, and then Central Florida in the Peach Bowl, and then last year going 8-5 once again. It was a very disappointing year for the Tigers, a year in which they had once again sights on the SEC championship game and maybe even the playoff. This is a year that Auburn is getting a lot of hype again, and a lot of pressure falls on Gus Malzahn if he fails to deliver results. And I think we'll have a pretty good idea of what Auburn's going to look like after their Week 1 game against Oregon. Gus Malzahn could slowly be on his way out of Auburn, and that would be very unfortunate for Tiger fans. He is a very solid coach, but once again, ever since that 2013 season when he got to the national championship, he has really failed to deliver results, and I'm surprised he was still there after such a disappointing season last year. But nonetheless, Malzahn is still a very solid coach, a very offensive-minded coach. We've seen very dynamic offenses at Auburn. There's a chance we could see that offense return this year. He deserves that number 6 spot. Mark Stoops, right in the middle. What he has done at Kentucky does give him the edge over a Will Muschamp, who has been in the SEC for a very long time during his time as a coordinator, head coach at Florida, and then a few years as head coach at South Carolina. Stoops gets the edge there because he has made Kentucky relevant once again, has not just made Kentucky a basketball school, but has once again made them a football school. Now, Stoops is one of the few coaches here that has been at the school for more than 3 years that has a losing record. He is 36-39 during his time at Kentucky. He went 7-6 2 years in a row, and then last year made some major strides, going 10-3, was in the hunt for the SEC championship up until the final few weeks of the season, and then won the Citrus Bowl over Penn State, a bowl that I don't really think many people saw Kentucky winning, but there was a lot of talent there, especially behind running back Benny Snell, that really was the catalyst for getting that bowl game win over the Nittany Lions. Keep in mind that before Mark Stoops had come into Kentucky, Kentucky had not been to a bowl game since the 2010 season. He got them there just 3 years ago to their first bowl game since, when they went 7-6 before falling to Georgia Tech in that bowl game. Mark Stoops doing phenomenal things for them. They do lose a lot of talent this year, but once again, Kentucky should get back to a bowl game in 2019. And at the end of the day, that is really all that Kentucky can be hoping for right now. In a division that is going to be dominated for a while by the likes of Georgia, Florida, maybe Tennessee that could be on the rise, Kentucky has to be content with 8, 9, maybe 10-win seasons, but at least just getting to the postseason. Mark Stoops is doing that. He has brought the fan base back to the Kentucky faithful, the Kentucky football faithful, I should say, and he deserves that number 7 spot in our rankings. Number 8, Will Muschamp, a coach that has kind of underwhelmed, I think, over the course of his entire career. He is 50-38 during his time as a head coach, and that includes his time at Florida as well as his time at South Carolina. His best season overall as a head coach came in 2012 when he went 11-2 with the Gators, of course falling to, I believe, Louisville in the Sugar Bowl. That was a big-time upset at the time. His best record was South Carolina, coming just a few years ago in 2017 when he went 9-4. Last year was supposed to be kind of a breakout year for South Carolina, a year they can maybe make 9 regular season wins. They did not do that. And then they got annihilated by Virginia in their bowl game. It was a very disappointing year for Will Muschamp. That's why he is kind of in the lower half of SEC coaches right now. He will never be one of the SEC elite, but he's still able to get the job done and get the teams to a postseason appearance. And that's really what most of these schools have to be content with, except for the likes of the perennial playoff contenders such as Alabama, Georgia, and you can even start to throw LSU, Florida, and Texas A&M in the likes of that. Joe Moorhead down at number 9. As we got down to coaches that were making their first appearances in the SEC, it became very difficult to rank these coaches. But Moorhead gets the 9 spot because this was his first head coaching gig. He was offensive coordinator at Penn State, and we saw the type of offenses that Penn State had. Very phenomenal, very solid. I had Saquon Barkley. Joe Moorhead coached him. Now, you come over to Mississippi State, he brought a very disappointing year for the Bulldogs. Last year was a veteran Mississippi State team. They had a veteran quarterback, a very, very talented defense. If you watched the NFL draft, you saw all that Mississippi State talent get drafted in the first and second rounds. Moorhead comes in and just goes 8-5 in year 1. This was a year that many thought Mississippi State could maybe win 9 or 10 games. Moorhead, though, you have to give first-year coaches a little bit of slack. You have to cut them a little bit of slack and give them some time. That's why he gets this number 9 spot. I think there is a somewhat upward trend and there is some hope in Starkville under Joe Moorhead, but after losing such a great coach in Dan Mullen, it is hard to expect the same results out of a new head coach in Joe Moorhead here. That's why he gets the number 9 spot. We'll see if he can maybe increase that spot, maybe jump up a couple spots when we do our rankings next year after the 2019 season. We get into the bottom half here, or really the lower section of the SEC. Number 10 comes Jeremy Pruitt, and we put him above everybody else, 11 through 14. Even though Tennessee did not have the greatest season last year, just barely missing out on the bowl game, I mentioned one of the biggest things was promise for the future. And Tennessee had a lot of promise for the future under Jeremy Pruitt. We see the fire that he brings, once again, learning under Nick Saban as a defensive coordinator, much like Kirby Smart did. He's bringing that fire, bringing that intensity, bringing that style of play to Tennessee. There is almost no doubt in my mind that Tennessee can make a bowl game in 2019, should make a bowl game in 2019. All the credit going to Jeremy Pruitt. That's why he gets the number 10 spot over the likes of Barry Odom and Derek Mason, who have been in the league longer than Pruitt. And speaking of Barry Odom, he comes in at number 11, right at 500 in his career with Missouri, 19-19 overall. He is slowly showing improvement, though. 4-8 in his first year, 7-6, then 8-5. Can they crack 9, maybe 10 wins in his 4th year with the Tigers? Keep in mind, they did add Kelly Bryant as a transfer. But Barry Odom, once again, it took some time. He got dealt a bad hand. Gary Pinkel's last year with Missouri was nothing to remember. He got dealt a hand with a very kind of young team that he had to really coach up, and we saw that major stride in his second year where they got to 7-6 and got to the Texas Bowl before losing to the Longhorns, to Texas. Barry Odom, one of those coaches that will never be one of the elite, but can consistently get Missouri to a bowl game and consistently, in theory, coach a solid defense, because that was what he was known for as defensive coordinator with the Tigers. Derek Mason at 12. There was a much debate between me and some others where I could have put Derek Mason a little bit lower here, but 12 is probably where he deserves to be, over the likes of Chad Morris and Matt Luke. Derek Mason, 24-38 during his time at Vanderbilt, like Gus Malzahn, on the hot seat going into 2019 because he's only made 2 bowl appearances during his time there, and both of those bowl appearances have been losses. So Derek Mason, right at number 12, can't go any higher, can't go any lower because Chad Morris and Matt Luke, but Derek Mason going to be on the hot seat if he cannot get the Commodores to a bowl game in 2019. So some big time strides need to be made for Vanderbilt. Can Derek Mason be the man to do the job? Vanderbilt's given him a lot of leniency, has given him a lot more time than I would have given a coach. He should be very grateful for that. Can he make more strides in 2019? We'll have to wait to find out. And like I said, number 3 and number 4, I struggled a little bit. I struggled the same way down here with number 13 and number 14. But in the end, I put Chad Morris above Matt Luke for this one reason only. It's because of the skill that Chad Morris has as a recruiter. Matt Luke was 11-13 during his time at Ole Miss, 4-12 in SEC play. That is the kicker. He's been there for, 2 years now, has only won 4 SEC games during his time there. Morris comes in year 1, yes, goes 2-10, but was once again dealt a horrible hand with the mess that Brett Bielema left over. And Morris, after going 2-10, was still able to recruit a top 25 recruiting class. That is something that Matt Luke has not been able to do and probably will not be able to do. Of course, left a bad hand as well after the mess that Hugh Freeze left. But Chad Morris gets the slight edge over Matt Luke despite having a worse record and despite being in the league for only 1 year. So that's why I give him the 13th spot instead of the last place spot. Both of these two teams struggling, have kind of been at the bottom of the SEC West, but have an opportunity to see the strides that they can make in just week 2 when these two teams face off in Oxford. So here are 2019 SEC head coaching football rankings going into this 2019 season. Obviously a no-brainer at number 1. Little discrepancy down here at the bottom, but we're going to have to wait to find out if these coaches can make some major strides. Who's too high? Who's too low? Leave your rankings for us. Tell us what you believe. If you think these rankings are great, tell us. If you disagree with them, tell us. Tell us who you think should be 1 through 14 in the SEC. We want to hear your opinions and bring some discussion in the comments below. And make sure you stay tuned, because we're not just doing this for the SEC. We're doing it for the Big Ten. We're doing it for the ACC, the Pac-12, and the Big 12. All the Power 5 conferences, we will be doing head coaching rankings, and you're not going to want to miss a single one. So as always, thank you for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time here on The Gridiron Expert.